Right now, hidden in a stretch of desert in northwest China, there are more than 300 giant concrete tubes buried deep in the ground. Almost none of them existed 5 years ago. And that is not even the scariest part. American spy satellites just caught China getting ready to do something it has not done in almost 30 years, something that could restart a nuclear arms race the whole world thought was over. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what China is building, why it worries the people in charge of America's military, and why some experts think it could lead to a war over a tiny island most people could not even find on a map, the desert full of secrets. A few years ago, regular people scrolling through satellite photos noticed something strange in the Chinese desert. Giant white domes were popping up everywhere, spread out across an area bigger than some entire countries. At first, nobody knew what they were for. Then, researchers figured it out. Under each dome, workers were building a missile silo. A missile silo is basically a deep concrete hole in the ground, built to hold a giant rocket that can carry a nuclear bomb all the way to the other side of the world. One field of these holes had about 120 of them. Then another field showed up with over 100 more. Then a third field appeared close to the border with Mongolia. All together, China went from having a small handful of these silos to building more than 300 of them in just a few years. That is more than 10 times what the country had before, and it happened faster than almost anything else in modern military history. To put that in simple terms, imagine a neighbor who has always kept one gun locked in a closet his whole life. Then one week you notice him pouring concrete for 300 gun safes in his backyard, all at the same time, working through the night. You would probably want to know why. That is exactly the question American military leaders started asking, and nobody in China would give them a straight answer. If stories like this make your jaw drop, you are going to want to stick around, because we dig into the wildest true stories in military and world news that barely make it into the regular headlines. Hit subscribe now so you never miss one, because this story is about to get even stranger. From almost nothing to a nuclear superpower. To understand why this desert full of silos is such a big deal, you need to know what China's nuclear weapons used to look like. For decades, China kept things small on purpose. While the United States and Russia were racing to build thousands of nuclear bombs during the Cold War, China stuck with a few hundred. Their thinking was simple. Even a small number of bombs is enough to make any enemy think twice before attacking. But there was another reason China stayed small too. For a long time, they could not have built more even if they wanted to. Their old missiles ran on a kind of liquid fuel that took hours to load before the rocket could even launch. That meant if an enemy satellite spotted them fueling up, those missiles could be destroyed before they ever left the ground. On top of that, the fuel itself was so dangerous that a small bump during transport could make it leak and explode. China's nuclear force was so overlooked back then that it did not even get its own military branch. It was tucked inside the regular artillery unit, almost like an afterthought nobody wanted to deal with. Everything changed once China poured enormous amounts of money into a new missile called the DF-41. This missile uses solid fuel, which is more like a hardened rubber block than a liquid. It gets poured into the rocket at the factory and hardens in place. That means it does not need hours to prepare before launch. It can sit ready to fire at a moment's notice, any day of the year. This single upgrade is a big part of why China suddenly needed hundreds of new silos, since these missiles finally gave them something worth protecting in the ground. Today, the Pentagon believes China already has a bit more than 600 nuclear warheads, with more than 100 missiles already loaded into those new silos. And the number could pass 1,000 by the year 2030. That still sounds small next to America's roughly 3,700 warheads, or Russia's 4,300. But it is the speed that worries people, not just the size. Going from a couple hundred warheads to over 1,000 in one decade is not normal growth for any country. It is a sprint. So the real question becomes, why the rush? To find an answer, we need to look at a much quieter, much creepier corner of the same desert. the underground warning sign. Deep in that same general region, far from the new missile silos, sits a place called Lop Nur. This is where China used to test its nuclear bombs by actually setting them off, all the way until 1996. After that year, China agreed to stop, along with almost every other country on Earth. For nearly 3 decades, the site sat mostly quiet, half forgotten by the outside world. Then satellites started noticing something odd. New roads appeared out of nowhere. New buildings went up. Machines were seen drilling tunnels straight into the mountains. Some of these tunnels run sideways into the rock. Others go straight down, deep enough to swallow a skyscraper whole. Experts who study this kind of thing say tunnels like these are usually built for one reason: testing nuclear weapons underground in a way that muffles the blast so the outside world cannot easily tell what just happened. Here is where it gets even more unsettling. There is a network of sensors spread across the entire planet, built specifically to catch anyone who tries to secretly test a nuclear bomb. It listens through the ocean floor with underwater microphones. It sniffs the air for radioactive particles. It feels the ground itself for tiny earthquakes that do not quite fit the pattern of a normal one. Think of it as a giant smoke detector for the whole planet, except instead of smoke, it is sniffing for nuclear explosions. A while back, this system picked up a strange, unusually small earthquake near one of China's old testing grounds. American intelligence agencies believe it may have been a secret nuclear test that China tried to hide from the rest of the world. China has denied all of this and says it never stopped honoring its promise not to test. But the tunnel digging did not stop either. And here is a twist that makes the whole thing even stranger. Just last year, President Trump announced that he was ordering the American military to start testing nuclear weapons again, too, for the first time in over 30 years, saying it needed to happen on an equal footing with other countries. Whether he meant setting off actual bombs or just testing the missiles that carry them was not totally clear, and even his own experts said doing a real explosive test would take years to prepare for. But the fact that the President of the United States felt the need to say that out loud, live, in the middle of a meeting with China's own leader, tells you how seriously this desert digging is being taken behind closed doors. To understand why any of this matters beyond a bunch of concrete and tunnels, we have to talk about the one island that could turn all of this from a buildup into a real war. The island that could set it all off. All of this concrete and all of these tunnels keep circling back to one small island: Taiwan. China claims Taiwan belongs to them. The United States has never officially promised to defend Taiwan if China attacks it, but it has also never said it would not. That fuzzy in-between answer has kept the peace for decades, mostly because nobody wanted to test what would happen if they pushed too hard. But something shifted recently. When President Trump met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing, Xi gave him a blunt warning. He said that if the two countries mishandled the Taiwan situation, it could lead to what he called clashes and even conflicts between the two biggest economies on Earth. That is about as close as a world leader gets to saying, we might end up fighting each other, without saying the actual words out loud. Now here is where the silos come back into the picture. Some experts believe China wants a nuclear arsenal so massive and so visible that the United States would think twice before ever stepping in if China tried to take Taiwan by force. The thinking goes like this: if a fight over Taiwan risks turning into a nuclear exchange, an American president might decide the island simply is not worth that price. Other experts see it differently. They think it is less about Taiwan specifically and more about respect on the world stage. A giant nuclear arsenal proves that China can no longer be pushed around by anyone, the same way owning a mansion sends a message to the whole neighborhood, even if you only ever use 2 of its rooms. Adding to the mystery, China's military also broke with tradition and rolled its nuclear missiles through the streets during a huge public parade recently, showing off weapons from its land, sea, and air forces together for the first time ever. For a country that always claimed to only want the bare minimum, That is a strange thing to want the whole world watching on television. There is also a theory that not every single one of those 300 silos actually holds a real missile. Some might be empty decoys, built so an enemy could never be sure which holes are dangerous and which ones are just concrete and dirt. It is an old trick from the Cold War, but it still works today. If you have to treat every single hole in the ground as a possible threat, you have already lost the ability to safely strike first, no matter how good your weapons are. Why this should matter to you. So, why should any of this matter to someone who is not a soldier, a spy, or a politician sitting in Washington? Because the entire point of a buildup like this is to send a message that everyone else eventually has to listen to, whether they want to or not. When one country quietly builds hundreds of new silos, digs new tunnels for underground testing, and then gets a blunt warning from its own leader about a small island half a world away that is not background noise, that is a shift in the balance of power that the whole planet will feel eventually, in ways big and small, from oil prices to the computer chips inside your phone that mostly come from right next to that same island. Nobody knows for sure yet whether this ends in an actual war, a tense standoff that slowly fades over time, or just an incredibly expensive game of who can look scarier on satellite photos. But one thing is certain, the desert is not finished changing, and neither is this story. If this kind of stuff blows your mind the way it blows mine, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. I want to know what you think, though. Do you believe China is genuinely getting ready for a real fight? Or is this just one giant game of nuclear poker? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want to go even deeper into this world, check out our other videos on the Taiwan standoff and how stealth bombers could change everything in a future war.